Well, first of all, then I went to the police station. And lo and behold,
this is a very abnormal way to make a movie, I just point out.
That's why a lot of people that try to make El Mariachi back in the days, they never understood how it was.
Yeah.
So I went to the police station, and obviously the main captain knew my family and knew me. So he goes, yeah, and guess what? Oh, man, you should use this thing. And again, it was meant to be, man. And he brings out this gun, and it was Escape from New York, the Uzi.
No.
From Escape from New York. And I was like, with the silencer, which is, I mean,
is that a gun that he had confiscated?
No, I mean,
that was like an issued weapon?
They had it there.
Oh my God.
And I go, this is perfect. This is perfect.
Welcome to More Than a Movie, a podcast that gives you a behind-the-scenes look at your favorite movies. I'm your host, Alex Fumero. Last season, we did a deep dive on American Me. This season, I'll focus on a different movie each episode, feature interviews with the biggest actors, directors, writers, and producers behind them, and tap into the history of Latinos in film. Just for reference, you might have heard of the movie Sicario, starring Benicio del Toro and directed by Denis Villeneuve, a name my producer Chloe is sure I have butchered, about an assassin going into Mexico to kill a bunch of dudes. That movie cost $30 million to make. El Mariachi, directed by a 24-year-old Robert Rodriguez, cost $7,000. Famously, it was paid for with money Rodriguez earned subjecting himself to medical trials. But what you might not know that much about is who was paying the bills at home at that time, who was making it possible to spend all that time and energy making the movie at all, and who was responsible for making sure it all got done. Get your guitar cases ready, because today, on More Than a Movie, we dive deep on the making of El Mariachi with star/producer/grip/special effects artist Carlos Gallardo, the mariachi himself, and producer Elizabeth Avian, who I will introduce you to right now. For those who don't know who Elizabeth Avian is, who are living under a rock, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela, Barquisimeto, Venezuela, and I moved to Texas when I was just barely a teenager, and I've been here in Texas since. I moved to Austin, Texas in 1986, and working for the Executive Vice President and Provost at the University of Texas at Austin, a young man came in who was coming to be our file clerk. His name is Robert Rodriguez. Mm-hmm. So we worked together in that office as things developed. And, because I worked in a place where I knew how the university was run, we were able to do a lot of things. And since he was also working in the office, we were able to, I guess you can say, maximize the ability for him to get into film school. He was already at UT as a student. It's just getting into film school was a separate thing. And, because he also had done 20 short films at that point that, just out of pure obsession since he was 12. And I saw his talent and I knew about film festivals. I've always loved film. River Oaks Theater in Houston was like my church. It was my place to go see movies, were art house movies. And because I didn't see those in my theater near my house. At 16, getting my car was freedom to go to the movies I wanted to see, not the ones that were down the street where we could walk, to the mall or whatever. And so that's how my love for film and my love for TV was born. And very young, when I moved to the United States, that's how I learned English, through television. So being able to help Robert from the very beginning, this is when he was just entering but already had 20 short films that he had done just sitting on a shelf on VHS. So we began to work together from then on and obviously fell in love. We had a bunch of children and we have 5 children. And then, just everything has continued and we've built everything here in Austin from the seed in 1988 when we met.
I've been to Troublemaker Studios. I've done a tour of it, and it's a tremendous facility. And it's so cool to be kind of behind the scenes of everything. So I'd love to know, when you meet Robert and you're working at the university, Were you ready for life as a film producer at that point in time? Because it's a very different life and you weren't a filmmaker yet, right?
Well, I studied, I was in theater at Rice and did film courses. In my heart, I always loved the medium. I love TV, I love film. But the fascinating thing is that the executive vice president and provost office is where I consider UT Austin, the University of Texas at Austin, a city, a small city. It's 100,000 people in a very small space. And we worked for the office that ran the city. So in that way, there was something about it that I was learning along the way. And the fascinating thing also is that Robert came and worked 10 hours a week, 15 hours sometimes, just to do filing. But he was also having the benefit of the ability to know who the chairman of the department is. Students don't know that. It's a huge university because Robert had won a film, and he was also a cartoonist. So he was already in that vein in communication. And I was, from the very beginning, also encouraging him because he has so much talent. And I know that my talent, and I've known that for a while in my life, is recognizing talent and supporting it. I did that when we were doing, when I was in the theater, I was always behind the scenes. I was never in front, never wanted to be in front. So I did 3 or 4 plays at Rice University in that way. So I always had that in me, the support, the being the one that lifts it up.
I've heard you say that for you, like your greatest purpose, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that your greatest purpose kind of as a producer is to support the casting crew, that you're basically there to be of service to those people. And so I'm wondering if your drive to help other people and to be involved in film, I know you have this innate love of film and that's why you wanted to do it, but do you think part of what drove you to be a producer? Because it's like, I was watching this video on YouTube and it was, it's one of these like videos where the guys are like recapping Robert's like 10-minute film school thing or whatever. And they're like, and he did it all by himself. And it was just Robert. And he wrote and directed and produced and acted. And I'm like, wait a second. First of all, there's more than just one person, but there's definitely a woman named Elizabeth Avian involved here. And so I know you don't love to put the shine on you, but I would love to know, tell me the origin story and tell me what you were thinking when this guy was like, I want to make this movie.
Well, let's begin real quick with the fact that, when we met in August 2nd of 1988, he was coming to get a job as a student file clerk because he needed to be able to stay in school. Mm-hmm. He also came from nothing. His family, both parents worked really hard. And in order to be able to stay in school, he had to get this job. He
wasn't even in the film school at that time, right? You sort of helped him get into the film school.
He just finished his freshman year.
Right.
And I have to say his grades were not very good. So he kind of lost a scholarship that he had. I'll just put it that way. So all of a sudden, the job was really necessary, for him.
Elizabeth, a younger man, a troublemaker. I'm seeing new sides of you.
Exactly. So by the way, but we immediately hit it off because it was like film and, he was Latino. I was the youngest person in that office. And we pretty quick fell in love. By the time we got married, January 1990.
Wow.
And so Mariachi was not even filmed till it was summer, July of 1991. So a year and a half after we were married. So what I always say is that he had the poorest sugar mama you could ever have. So that is the explanation, Yeah. Somebody had to pay the bills. Somebody had to, he made a little bit of money, but all of it pretty much went to get supplies to make his comic strip. That's expensive stuff, just the ink alone. So that's how Los Hooligans Productions is born. So this is where I first step in and I go, dude, I'm paying so much in taxes and you are paying some in taxes and we're getting nothing back. And we're spending all of our money on things that we are working on. So I had him go set up Los Hooligans Productions as an DBA.
How old are you at this age?
I was probably 25. And that's how we started. So I could do our taxes and at least not have to pay in. So that's how it all kind of began to fold. And I was always helping him, like even in critique, even when he was doing little movies. When I saw his first film, I was like, this dude is Spielberg in the making. What can I do to help him?
Yeah.
So getting him to the film school. So he had access to a computer at the office to be able to write on Mariachi.
Right.
So he would be answering our phones while we all went to lunch, and he would take that shift and sit at the computer and be able to write. And I love that office was so lovingly and supportive of this, So he goes through and he gets into film school. Then he does Bad Head, his first semester, and the thing ends up being in 14 film festivals. And I was just of support with anything. Email this, FedEx that, do anything.
That's a producer's job, right? You're basically like, a producer is also just like anything. You're the joker in the deck, and there's like, oh, somebody needs to hold the boom, you're doing it.
Absolutely. And by the way, Robert had no college loans.
Right.
At all. We paid for it as we went. And that's why also, because I knew in the trajectory, I knew what happens when you get to Hollywood and you're starving. You take whatever job, or they smell blood. They smell blood, And I was like, we're going to stay here. They can't smell blood. You cannot have debt. We cannot have debt, So that's why he ended up going to Pharmaco several times. If he wanted a camera, if he wanted something, he had to be a lab rat.
Pharmaco being where he would go let them experiment on him.
Exactly. So that's how Mariachi comes about.
Was that your idea? Were you sending him there, or was?
No, that was not my idea.
Oh, okay.
But you need to understand, this is all over like the daily Texan newspapers, because they need college-age kids to test these drugs on, especially men. You pay a pretty good penny depending on the study, and it was a lot of money. So
Robert's doing medical experiments. This is the old, it's not an urban legend. It's true. He's raising money doing these experiments, but you're also, what are you doing at the time? Are like this magical number of $7,000 that went into Mariachi, like how is it actually raised? Like, are you putting your like paycheck into this?
Well, by the way, let me begin. Those 20 movies that I talked about earlier, the 20 short included a kid named Carlos Gallardo, who was a boarding student at the high school that Robert was going to school in also.
Oh, no way.
So they become friends. And many of those movies are from that high school that he put together. There's some fabulous ones.
So cool.
They really are. Little movies, and also movies that he had gone to Ciudad Acuña with Carlos during the summer or during Easter or whatever, some vacation time. And they would make these little movies, these little shoot 'em ups.
Yeah.
So it was already established, that it was happening. So Robert begins to create something that they can sell to the Mexican market, because we kept seeing these really bad churro movies made for nothing, being rented over and over at the grocery store that had a video store in it. And, there was Blockbuster, and then there was that little store. And there was a corner, because it was an area of a lot of immigrants, where they would show up and pick like 4 or 5 movies. And Robert kept seeing these immigrants like, what the hell are they watching? What? Because it would be nothing that we had heard of. So he started grabbing those and going, dude, we can make better movies of this and sell them to the same market and get more money.
Right.
And then build, that's why it's in Spanish. So the money, Carlos Gallardo came up with $3,500 and Robert came up with $3,500 from his time in Pharmaco. He went into a study where he stayed there a month. That was the first time he'd ever been gone for a month.
Were you worried? Like, the guy's gone for a month.
Yeah.
Do you remember what the study was? Like, what were they studying?
It was it was kind of funny. It was a cholesterol lowering drug. But by the way, in order to be in the study, your cholesterol couldn't be too high, couldn't be too low. It was just a blessing from God. It really was. That his cholesterol was just bad enough that they said, yes, come on in. And he was a healthy male. So, so it was very lucky, but he had done, that was, I think, the 3rd or 4th study he had been in.
Is it Lipitor?
Lipitor, that's the one.
Oh my God. So Lipitor paid for El Mariachi.
Basically.
So they come up with this money.
Yeah.
And then what's the message to you? Like, they're like, okay, we got the money. We're going to go shoot. What's kind of your first move?
He already had been writing the script. Well, he had been writing the script, and this study comes up and Robert signs up for it. And that's how he knew he could get $3,500. When he got out of there, they give you a check.
Yeah.
So cash it and done. So while he was in Pharmaco, the month he was there, he was finishing writing everything while Carlos was back in Ciudad Acuña, kind of like they were already plotting everything.
Carlos is Carlos Gallardo, who we will talk to in just a few moments. But right now, I have to go do some medical trials to earn some money to supplement how few ads I actually make you guys listen to. So feel bad for me and listen to this. Welcome back to More Than a Movie. I'm your host, Alex Fumero. I am here with a man who wears many hats in general now, still in his life, but definitely with regard to the iconic 1993 film El Mariachi. It would be probably easier to list the things he didn't do on that movie than the things he did do on that movie. But you probably know Carlos Gallardo as the man himself, the titular role in El Mariachi.
Yes.
Carlos, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So the first thing I wanted to start with was just, the movie itself is set in a place that's very familiar to you. Can you tell us a little bit about Ciudad Acuña and how the film ended up being set in this small border town in Mexico?
Well, I was actually born in Ciudad Acuña, and I was raised in Ciudad Acuña. But I also was raised, Ciudad Acuña is a border town, so I can't not mention Del Rio, Texas, because I would go to school in Del Rio. I would go to school in Mexico. Even in kindergarten, I started going to school in the mornings and then in the evenings in Spanish in Ciudad Acuña in kindergarten. Then in grade school, I went in Ciudad Acuña. And then in sixth grade, I went back to the U.S., 6, 7, and 8. And then again in Mexico, 6, 7th, 8th, and 9th.
I think a lot of people don't realize that life in a border town, the border is sort of imaginary in a lot of ways, right? Like it's there. It's obviously, it's a physical boundary at checkpoints and whatnot. But people who live in border towns often live their lives kind of with a foot in each country.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like being in Glendale, going to Hollywood. The only thing is that you cross a checkpoint. That's the only difference.
And how did you end up going to school in the States? Did you have to have because you were living in Acuña?
In Acuña, yeah.
So did you have to give like a fake residence or anything? Or?
No, not in those years, obviously.
You could just say, I want to go to school here?
We're talking about 1980. Then it got a little bit interesting. In 8th grade, my family decided they were going to send me to San Antonio, Texas for high school. And that's when I went to San Antonio, to St. Anthony's Seminary.
And that was a kind of boarding school?
Boarding school, yeah. I lived there, and that's actually where I met Robert Rodriguez.
Do you remember, how did you and Robert become friends? I mean, there are lots of kids in school, but how did you guys become friends?
I remember that day. It was the first weekend of that first week in freshman. And they would let us go to the mall. So everybody was, after a whole week, being there for the first time, I'm pretty sure with a lot of kids, it was all new. And I saw a couple of kids. They were around a bed I think they were looking at a newspaper because they were searching for what movies they wanted to go see. And I was kind of like by myself, and I started walking there and kind of joining that little group. Robert Rodriguez was in that little group, and they were planning to go to the movies. And I loved movies because, again, I didn't mention, but my mom took me to the movies like 3 times a week when I was a baby.
Well, actually, I wanted to talk about that without sort of jumping ahead to El Mariachi. El Mariachi was originally designed to be a Spanish language film that was going to, it is a Spanish language film, but that was going to be distributed in Mexico.
Yes.
As part of a tradition of a certain type of movie that was popular in Mexico.
Yeah, they used to be called video homes.
Video homes.
That was the category, which was the very B movies that they were making in Mexico.
And did you grow up watching those kinds of movies?
Never. No, the type of movies I would see were American, Star Wars, and Indiana Jones and all that stuff.
So you didn't grow up really watching those kinds of movies. The movies that you grew up watching were kind of the classic or blockbuster American films. And what is it about those movies that really spoke to you? And how did you sort of influence the story of El Mariachi with those references?
Well, I hated the way I spoke.
hated the way you spoke.
Yeah, I didn't speak like this. I heard myself when I was recording one time. I mean, come on, when you're a kid and you hear yourself, you sound like a girl. Everybody does.
Sure.
When you're like a kid.
Yeah, if your voice isn't cracking
And you
yet,
kind of freak out.
Yeah.
And so when I saw those movies, I go, those guys don't speak. That's it. Those are the characters that I want to play.
The silent, quiet type.
Yeah. In El Mariachi, I mean, we found out that I speak a lot with my eyes as well as an actor.
I would say that's true. El Mariachi is very dialogue light.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can get into a little bit of talking about the script for El Mariachi. How soon were you involved with the shaping of the story? How early were you involved in the shaping of the story of El Mariachi?
I think that El Mariachi, from my point of view, it was type of an evolution. Because before that, we made a movie that was 10 minutes long.
Short, yeah.
And it was called The Return of the Rat. And in that movie, you can see that I'm already dressed very much like an El Mariachi. But then, like Water for Chocolate, I have to tell you that to get to
right, because your first big gig in a Hollywood type of movie was as a PA on like Water for Chocolate.
Yeah. So Water for Chocolate came, I think it was around November of 90. And then I got a job on the 1st of January because Alfonso Arau found out that a lot of people knew me. So I could be a big of a help for the production and getting a lot of stuff for.
Because it was shot where you grew up.
It was shot exactly where I grew up, but about 15 miles away, near the dam. You know, a family member knew that he was there, and they introduced us because he was like staying in a hotel like a block from my house, and he was a guy who was from Mexico but working in the U.S. So then I got a job as a PA, and I was a chauffeur. I was basically everything.
But you learned a lot on that set.
Yes, and you know what I learned? I learned that the difference between the movies we were already making, Robert and myself, in high school and college, the only difference, it was the lighting and the camera. That's it. The rest is just problems, solving, props, location. It was that the only difference. It was just the camera and the lightings. So fast forward to the time I was from January till April. I asked Robert, come to the set, you know, come and see what we're doing and everything. So he came and he met Alfonso, he met Laura Esquivel, Emmanuel Lubezki.
Wow, what an experience you kind of created for him there to be able to go. I mean, that's the first time I imagine he was on a big movie set.
And they loved him because then he brought a couple of also the shorts that he was making.
Oh, he did that smart.
Yeah, and he showed it to them. And so they loved him. They fell in love with him. So he came and visited, and he was there for a couple of days. He arrives at my house, and I kept going. But we met a guy there. I met a guy there first who was in locations, and he was part of those other movies, the video homes that you could do like for $10,000 or $20,000 or something like that. And I told Robert, why don't we make something with this guy? And that was my whole thing.
And video homes is like, is it more
it was
like
a type of,
is it
it's like
more
B
like
movies. It's
B
like,
movies, but like direct to VHS,
exactly.
what we would call back in the day, or direct to DVD.
They would direct to TV I think to Univision and Telemundo as well.
Right.
But also direct to, VHS.
Like Televisa.
Direct to the video blockbusters and all that, to the Latino kind of like
side of it.
And mostly for Mexico as well, for TV in Mexico. So that was the idea.
And you meet this guy and you're like, we could make some money making one of these movies.
I never said we could make some money, to be honest with you. It was always about we could make a movie because it was never about making money or anything. It was because I was doing this since I was 12 and he was doing that since he was 11 or 12. Because when we and Robert met, I showed him a little film that I did in 8mm, and then he showed me a little film that he did in 8mm. But his film was all clay like Gumby.
Yeah.
But I was blown away.
Claymation, yeah.
I was like, God, this is like Gumby. How did you do that? And I knew there and then that he had the talent. Like he's like 99% artist. I'm not 99%, I'm like 50-50.
Yeah. So at the time, the business side of it was like, forget that. We just want to make a cool movie.
So I kept telling Robert we should do something for this guy, and he's like offering us this and offering us that, which we ended up not doing that. But then somehow in April, Like Water for Chocolate stopped.
They stopped production?
Yeah, they did stop twice, I believe, because they had like any movie, they had money problems. The money didn't come in, and da-da-da-da. So then we started talking about what I had. What do I have? Because now, after having that experience, now it's real.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a real thing. Now that I see this movie, how it's done, now it's getting real. Now it's like, okay, the fear is out. The questions have been answered. Now it's time to really shift.
How old are you at this point?
God, I think I was 22, or 22, 23.
I love the kind of like naivete of a 22-year-old who's like, I was a PA on this one movie, and now I'm ready to produce a feature film.
But you have to also
you have to have that to make the film happen.
But you have to also understand, which in a lot of festivals they think that out of the blues we just made El Mariachi. You have to put yourself in my shoes. We started making movies. I started making movies with Robert in freshman year, and we're talking about
14 years old.
We presented one of those movies at Sundance in 2013. And it was such a experience to actually watch it with an audience, what we had created when we were 15 or something like that.
Yeah.
And they were reacting. I mean, and there is the angles, the editing, the music, just the quality.
Yeah.
But all that was there. I mean, Robert had it. He was such a talent. And I spoke to a lot of directors, and they were like fascinated with some of the angles we used. But for us, it was, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know when, but a couple of years ago, we spoke, me and Robert, and we said, yeah, we were badass. We were. I'm sorry, but we were. And that, I don't know if it sounds, how do you say that word?
Arrogant?
Arrogant.
No, it sounds like you made a movie for $7,000 that like tore through Hollywood.
But when we were doing
Yeah.
the little shorts, we knew that we were like, because we would show them in high school. So anyways, so what I'm trying to say is that we had 8 years of doing this shorts.
Mhm.
Every year we would make one. So getting to the point when I say, okay, now I get it.
It's a little bit of that 10,000 hours
Now
theory.
I understand. The thing is that when Robert came in and said, well, we could do this because I just did Bedhead and it was like $800 and it was 8 minutes. So then he was the one that did the math, and he goes, maybe we could do something that is about 80 or 90 minutes. Then it would be like $10,000 or something like that. We came under budget. So that's one of the first ideas that came in. And then during the time of April, when we shut down Like Water for Chocolate, then Robert said, well, let's see what you have. Like what access do you have? So then I started, we have a ranch. We have the bar for my sister. We had a ranch for my sister's uncle.
The bar you shot in,
The Corona Club is my
your sister's bar?
Is my sister's bar at the time. Yeah. Because it was my brother-in-law's brother. They were renting it.
And Moco's Ranch is the...
Moco's Ranch is also part of the same family.
Uh-huh.
The Garzas in Acuña.
And how did you... Well, we're hopping around a bit. Just to take a step back.
Yeah.
And it relates to this. Robert famously, put himself through clinical trials to raise some money for this film. But you also raised the rest of the money for the film.
Yes.
How did you pull that scratch together?
Well, that's the story. He did do that stuff, and I just at that time my mom had some land, and I sold some land, and I didn't tell her.
Wait, what? Your mom had some land and you sold it without telling her?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Because we had already sold a couple things before. So That's how it happened. I mean, it was just a piece of land.
But so you went to someone that you knew in the town or something, and you were like, "Do you want to buy this?" And then you, without telling your mom about the profits,
yeah, and it was actually
the film.
and it was actually, I think what I got from that, it was $5,000.
Did your mother get an executive producer credit on the film as a
That's
result?
why I was going to say that's why she's alongside Elizabeth Avalon.
Amazing. I too sold my family's land from under them, but I keep all that money. Unlike the money from this ad, I'm actually not entirely sure where that goes. Anyway, we'll be right back. Welcome back to More Than a Movie. I'm your lazy host who only hosts and produces this podcast, and I have a lot of help. But Carlos Gallardo did way more than that on El Mariachi. Do you know how many times it says Carlos Gallardo in the credits?
No, that I don't know.
We'll count it. We'll count it and insert it.
Well, if it says a lot, I'm sure that is not enough.
Right. Side note, Carlos Gallardo appears 4 times in the credits for El Mariachi, and he is correct. That does not sound like enough. Well, that's a good segue into what you did do on the film. So obviously, you're the lead actor in the film. You're the star of the movie. But there's a slew of other things, from pushing the wheelchair that you used as a dolly, right?
Yeah.
So Robert could shoot. So what are the other jobs that you did while you were...
Well, my main job was, the producer. I was the one in charge of all the permits. I had to speak to the mayor, which they knew my family.
Right.
And I got him to say yes to the police people to allow us to use our guns. But then the military said, no, you can't do that. So then I had to go now to talk to the military guy. So then when I spoke to the military guy, he said, "But what about if you're telling me that you're making a movie, but you're actually going to rob a bank?" And we were like, "What?" I mean, I was like so naive that I was like, I couldn't believe that he was saying that. I go, no. So anyways, that was a no from the military.
Uh-huh.
So then the whole day passed, and I'm thinking, how can I go around this? How can I go around this? And I went to City Hall. So now I'm getting involved now, literally, like officially.
Yeah.
Because the mayor had said, yeah, but just like,
yeah, it's fine with me.
It's fine with me. But now I get involved legally, City Hall.
Yeah.
And I go back to the military guy, and he says, "Okay, all right," because it's now part of government.
So then they gave you guns?
No, not gave us guns.
Lent you guns?
Well, first of all, then I went to the police station, and lo and behold.
This is a very abnormal way to make a movie, I just point out.
That's why a lot of people that tried to make El Mariachi back in the days, they never understood how it was.
Yeah.
So I went to the police station, and obviously the main captain knew my family and knew me.
How big is the town, by the way?
About 100,000 back then.
Yeah, so not very big.
No.
Yeah.
No, not very big. And everybody knows each other. Now it's become an industrial town, so it's a little bit bigger. So the main guy, he goes, "Oh, Carlos, of course." So it was because my dad was a very famous doctor. Obviously, there was not a lot of doctors in the towns. So he was a very well-known person. So everybody knew me as Carlos Gallardo's son.
Right.
So he goes, "Yeah, and guess what? Oh, man, you should use this thing." And again, it was meant to be, man. And he brings out this gun, and it was Escape from New York, the Uzi.
No.
From Escape from New York. And I was like, with the silencer, which is, I mean,
is that a gun that he had confiscated?
No, I mean,
that was like an issued weapon?
They had it there.
Oh my God.
And I go, this is perfect. This is perfect. And then I said, what other guns? And then there was a shotgun. There were other little guns, but
Why do police have an Uzi with a silencer? That's so crazy.
I think that if you go now, or even then,
they must have confiscated that gun. That can't be something that came where the military was like, you know what you need? A way to kill a lot of people quietly.
I think it was, again, meant to be. There were certain things that, certain nights that I would have all these problems that were very difficult.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, it'll work out. It'll work out. And then somehow, bit and behold, it would work out.
How did you take the producer hat off and put the actor hat on? Like, how did you, there's so many moving parts. You're responsible for so many things. Your performance is dialed in. So how do you put all that stuff to the back of your mind and just focus on the scene at hand? And especially when you guys shot, well, talk about the process a little bit. You guys didn't shoot that many takes. So what was that like for you as Carlos, the actor, now having to work inside this environment that Carlos, the producer, has helped create?
Well, it was very interesting, even in scenes, because Carlos, the actor, is not acting against anybody. It's just acting against nothing. But everybody else is actually looking at me because I'm feeding them the lines one by one. And I'm telling them to watch my forehead, because what I've noticed back then, if they were to see my eyes or me, their eyes, they would get nervous. It's just human nature. It has nothing to do with me or anything. It's just human nature. At least when you're young.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen at all right now. It's like, but I would feel that they would get nervous because they were not actors.
Right. You just got people from the town.
But I picked people that knew the girl worked on politics. And Domino worked on politics, and she would go to neighborhoods and speak. So I said, she's a public speaker, so then she can handle this. Bigoton, the mustache guy, he was a teacher. He was my teacher.
Really?
At one moment in time in those night schools. And I said, obviously, if you talk to a class full of students, he can act. So I picked that. And then Azul had previously made movies with us. Then Moco was discovered by Robert. They met at the lab.
At the experimental lab?
At the experimental lab.
Interesting.
Yeah. So everybody's acting towards me. And then obviously I have Robert here by my side in the camera.
And you find this really ingenious way of getting them to not be nervous and deliver their lines by looking at your forehead instead of your eyes.
Yes, that I found. So they wouldn't get nervous or anything. And I would just look down. And then sometimes I would be doing this, like when a maestro does orchestra.
Conducting.
Yeah, and I was like really, but I was obviously following what Robert would be like saying, tell her to do this or tell her to do that. And I would be like, could you do it slower? Could you do it?
So you're also like ADing also while you're yet another job.
Well, there you go. That's
All right. Talking to having to relate what the director wants to the actor is awesome. And then suddenly you're the actor in the scene.
And then when I'm the actor, the camera's on me, and obviously I have Robert, and he goes, hey, can you? And then there's a scene where he goes, how would you do this? And then I would come in, he goes, no, do it like this. And then he would tell me, and I go, oh, that's even better. Because again, I mean, this is the first, all the movies we did for 8 years.
Yeah.
I would only say one or two words.
Right.
And it was all action. And they were all basically based on stuff that we would watch on TV. But we always had stories. Never scripted, ever.
All
for
improvised.
8 years. So it was a great 8 years of practice. That when we got to El Mariachi,
there's just a shorthand.
Then it was like, okay, so Robert got writing the script and everything. And then when I saw it, then I translated in Spanish to give it that, not translated. It needed
interpreted
to be interpreted and give it that lingo and that extra stuff that it was part of my world, which was a border town.
So it would be authentic.
Yeah.
And so the movie comes out. Tell me about Sundance and how it went from this movie that you thought was going to be kind of a direct-to-video, Spanish language, Mexican audience movie to the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah.
Now, so we go straight to the festivals, and Columbia Pictures already bought it, though.
Is that right? Tell me. Yeah, tell me how it happened.
Well, so we finished the film, And now we're going to go to LA on December of 91 and to sell it to these companies. Remember, we're doing the film so we can sell it to the Mexican distribution companies.
Yeah.
So long story short, we tried to sell it. So nobody wanted the film. So now we're back. We're driving back, and I was always very cheerful.
Wait, hold on one second. Did anyone tell you why they didn't want it?
They just, first of all, what's the biggest thing in Hollywood right now? Have you take a script to anybody, they go, well, who's attached?
Right.
So there was nobody who was known.
The name recognition.
Nobody was known. And so nobody wanted it. So we came back frustrated. But during our stay in LA, Robert had previously gotten a card from a person, Robert Newman, who had gone to talk at school.
Right.
So we went to see him and we dropped off the trailer.
Yeah.
Fast forward, the assistant called us back and he told Robert, so you shot this trailer for $7,000. No, we shot the whole movie. What? But anyways, that's how it all started.
And that was famously Bob Newman, who's
Robert Newman. Yeah, Robert Newman.
Who's Robert Rodriguez's agent.
Yeah. And so then we went back, obviously. But then he got signed on January, but only on the basis that, okay, we can probably show this movie around and see what happens, because they didn't even know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So fast forward to April, and obviously Robert went to see Warner, everybody, but nobody knew what to do with it. So I remember in April, I was in my hometown. I took a trip to Austin. That night, I got to Robert's place, and Robert Newman called, and they said, they were like at the last minute. So either you want to go with this company or with Columbia Pictures. And I was there. I was actually there, present. And they were like, well, I think Columbia. Thank God we went with Columbia Pictures and not with, I'm not going to say the other company, but thank God we went with Columbia Pictures.
And so then how does the film get submitted to Sundance?
So now, on that summer, now we had to re-edit the film by hand. So then they said, why don't we send it to festivals? So their first festival is Telluride. So Telluride they put it for one screening. Mm-hmm. And I think it was so popular that I wasn't there in that festival, but it was so popular because Robert called me and goes, guess what? It was supposed to be for one screening. And I think it was more than 3 or 4 or 5 or something like that. But after that, I went with him to Toronto.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to January, Sundance. I think I remember two screenings from what I remember. And then, surprise, we win the Audience Award. Now, by winning that totally changed a lot of things. That changed our lives.
When this airs, it'll be 31 years since the release of El Mariachi. What's the legacy you hope, is left by El Mariachi for people who, especially for Latinos who see it from now until the end of time? What's the thing you hope they take away from it and from the making of it?
One of my quotes that I said when we first came to Hollywood, there were many Latinos already here, but we were the ones that changed the industry in order for more filmmakers that were coming behind us, that we gave them hope that you could make a movie for low budget. And I'm hoping to keep carrying the torch for independent cinema, which since 2009, I started trying to find directors that I work with and getting myself involved and then try to be in their movies and then try to help them out to get a break.
Very fun. Well, thank you, Carlos. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, of course. Next time on More Than a Movie, much to the happy surprise of everyone, including the filmmakers themselves, a movie with an all-Latino cast and crew won the top jury prize at Sundance this year. We'll speak to the star of that movie, none other than Residente from Calle 13. You will not want to miss it. More Than a Movie Season 2 was produced by Chloe Tagliagambe with the help of Reynolds Gutierrez and Veronica Hernandez in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura Podcast Network. Hosted by me, Alex Fumero. Edited by Rose Reed and Chloe Tagliagambe with the help of Saida Quevedo. Executive producers are Carmen Graterol, Rose Reed, Isaac Lee, and me, Alex Fumero. Sound design by Gonzalo Messi. Original music by Golden Minds, Darko, and Iame. Recorded at JTB Studios and Vaudeville Sound. Our executive producers at iHeart are Giselle Bances and Arlene Santana. For more My Cultura podcasts, listen to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.